Hey everyone, I just got back from going for a run, like I try to do most mornings. I'll talk about that another time, but today I want to talk about something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. I just haven't had the sort of spark like I got yesterday. So I'm not sure what I'm going to title this video. Probably something like I'm doing it, because I want to talk about a little story that is about myself. It's about something that I thought about maybe 4 years ago that has kind of been in the back of my head for years and years now. And it wasn't until yesterday where I finally hit a spark and realized, like, I'm actually doing the thing I wanted to do. 4 years ago, I remember vividly laying awake at night in my bed, thinking about my future. And oftentimes people, including myself, will think about sort of like negative things, you get anxious thinking about what the future could be like. But this time, I was thinking about what I wanted it to look like. And not just thinking about what I wanted right now, it was a sort of deep feeling that I got in myself. And I think that a lot of ways what I do want in my future has changed, as most things in my life have changed. But that night I had a vivid sort of scene, imagination in my head. I imagined myself waking up in the middle of the night in a very white room. I remember thinking about the moonlight coming through the window, and there were just these white drapes on the sides of the window. It was a big window that would cover like almost the entire wall type of window. And I was sleeping in a bed. The bed was completely covered with white sheets, all like super sort of like modern utopia kind of white. And then I woke up, and I remember thinking about myself walking out the door and going into the bathroom that I somehow managed to find, looking at myself in the mirror and seeing like a sort of muscular build. Like it wasn't super like big, but it was kind of like toned, because at the time I wasn't working out. I think I was just starting to run. And I started thinking about like what I could look like in the future if I worked out, if I was in good shape. I looked in the mirror. I saw myself I think at the time I thought about myself with a really nice jaw, like nice hair, like everything. But now when I think back on it, I don't really think about the jaw. I think more about just kind of having a toned build, something that's kind of visible through the shirt. I was wearing a tight white t-shirt, my boxers, because I was sleeping, and the bathroom was white. It was very clean, very like modern, very sleek. I remember looking in the mirror and just seeing myself and being like, whoa, like, is this who I'm going to become? I thought about myself in that moment, laying in my bed awake at night. Is this what I'm going to be like in the future? I decided to give myself an age at this time, and I said, like, okay, if this is what I want to be like, what age does that seem plausible? What age would I want to reach that point before it's like, before it's too far or something? And I thought 30. And I'll go into more. There's more than just looks. There's more than just walking into the mirror and seeing looks. I remember also thinking about like, what do I want to have accomplished at that time? And at the time, I think I was just getting started on learning languages. And so I told myself, like, okay, I want to speak 5 languages, including English, so 4 other languages. And for some reason, one of those languages was French. And I think the reason I came about that was because in my thought, in my imagination, like thing that I was thinking about at night, laying next to me was a woman, in bed, presumably my girlfriend or wife. And she comes up to me after I get up, look in the mirror, examine myself. She comes up and then she speaks to me in French. I guess I thought about that as like some like rich, nice way to be um, more like hoity-toity. I also at the time I was learning Spanish, and so I wanted to speak Spanish and French. And I'm not sure what the two other languages were. I think one of them that I thought about was Indonesian. I thought about learning Indonesian because at the time I recently met a girl from Indonesia, and she inspired me to kind of learn Indonesian. She used to always tell me about like all the opportunities there are there, about how you can make so much money from teaching English. I was just really infatuated with Indonesian, and I still am, just to a lesser degree. I'm not sure what the other language was. It might have been, I think it was either Italian or Tagalog. Probably Italian. But anyway, I wanted to learn 4 languages. You know, at this point in my life, when I'm looking in this mirror, in my imagination, you know, trying to keep the context here. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, when I'm 30 years old, I'm gonna speak 5 languages, including English. Okay, have like a nice muscular build, have a wife, live in a nice house, and then I was also learning an instrument at the time. I was learning the keyboard, the piano, and so I said, okay, well, I want to learn the piano and the guitar. All right, I gave myself that goal. I said, but by the time I'm 30, I want to have learned 4 languages other than English and 2 instruments. And I kind of forgot about that idea, kind of forgot about that thought for a while, because, you know, things started going in a different direction in life that I didn't expect. You know, I was going to go to the University of Oregon. I ended up not going. I ended up moving to Portland. Or even before all of that, I started running for cross country, meeting other, you know, people. It kind of changed my desires in life. I started reading different kinds of books and movies that changed my perspective on things, right? So I kind of put that thought away into the back of my head, you know, and as I started continuing and moving on, you know, I started to realize that the lady I was next to started to have a face. You know, it was like the face of my girlfriend. And that's because at the time when I thought about who this person would be laying next to me, they didn't have a face. I just remember them being a little tall and speaking French, wearing a white gown. Other than that, it was just like a black outline of a person, like a dark sort of, you know, silhouette of a person. There was no face attached to it. It's kind of weird to talk about, but it's like if you imagine yourself with someone, but the someone, you don't know who that person is. So it's like imagining yourself like going on a date, for example. You're at a restaurant going on a date. And I was young when I thought about this. I was only 14. I didn't really have anyone in mind to think about. I just felt like I really wanted to be with someone by the time I'm 30. I guess that's how much hopes I had, how much hope I had for myself at the time. But going on in my life, things changed. And then all of a sudden, just this week, my girlfriend, she gave me her guitar. I started playing it, and it's like this spark just lit up in my head. The idea that I had from so many years ago has just been consuming my head, where I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm on my way there. I'm learning the keyboard, piano, if you will. I mean, I prefer the piano, but the keyboard is what I have if it's in my room. So I'm learning the guitar, I'm learning Spanish, I'm learning Italian. I speak conversationally, and, you know, probably on the European Common Framework about an A2 or B1. You know, I can have basic conversations, ask for instructions, but I'm still learning it, so I know I'm going to get better. So that's 3 languages so far. You know, English, Spanish, and Italian. That's 3 out of the 5 languages I was going to learn. Already picking up 2 instruments. I'm not super great at them. In fact, I don't know if I'll ever really be able to play the guitar or the piano, because I don't have that kind of the mind of a musician, you know, where I can just know what key I'm in, playing a certain scale, and just know what sounds good immediately. And I know that you have to spend a lot of time to get there, and so that's why I'm continuing to play and practice. But I'm still really enjoying the process, and it feels like since I've started learning the guitar and the piano, it's almost like my memory's gotten way better. It's kind of like, instead of thinking about it as just reading, like a going through a flashcard, you know, just like knowing it or whatever, just going through it like it's a school assignment. Instead, I've sort of gotten my brain to a point of thinking about what I'm actually doing, thinking about the studying, thinking about actually learning the information that I'm getting from these study sessions and from playing the piano, from playing the guitar. It takes a little bit of tuning, you know, it doesn't just come passively for me, and that's the thing. It takes a little bit of tuning for myself. I have to think a little bit more critically about it. When I play the piano, sometimes I have to break down the song that I'm trying to learn it, you know, learn the chords, practice the left hand and the right hand. But once you start figuring out these study methods, it makes it so much easier to learn other pieces. You start to understand how you break down the song. Maybe try to practice the bass, practice, you know, what chords are used in the bass, and then what chords are used in the melody. And then you start to reapply that to every song that you learn. It's the same thing for me on the guitar. I love when I start finding similarities between the chords that I'm playing. It kind of makes it feel like, instead of like learning all the parts of this song and all the parts of this song, it's like, okay, what I'm actually learning is just these different chords. And so it's as if I'm not learning all this song and all this song, I'm just learning the set of chords. Sometimes those chords appear separately, but sometimes those chords appear in both songs, and it makes it so much easier to understand. So to wrap up this video, I just want to say I'm doing it. Like, it's really crazy to think about. Just a couple years ago, I was still just staying in my room, playing video games all day, and nothing against people who play video games. I love playing games now more than ever, even since I started live streaming. But I've came to a point where I'm continually working out so I can get that kind of build that I saw myself. Even this beard I didn't have a year ago. I'm learning languages, I'm learning instruments. It's like all these things are coming together, and that idea is coming back into my head, and I'm like, I'm not even 20 years old yet, and I'm almost there. The most important thing to me about the thought is less about the house, less about what I'm wearing or how I look, and thinking more about the skills. To me, that was kind of the thing that sparked that original thought of this whole scene about the white drapes and the nice house and looking good. It was the skills, right? Because I wanted to like know languages, I wanted to know instruments, and it's like I'm actually getting to that point. The other side of the coin, of course, is having a great income to afford a house, you know, being able to pay for nice things, you know, like sort of utopia, right, with the white drapes, the white bed, you know, white walls, and you're super comfortable mentally too, in that you can just let yourself relax because you're thinking, like, oh yeah, I completed all my work. I'm here to just enjoy myself. I'm not stressed about anything, and it's really hard for me to do that nowadays. So that's something I need to work on, and that's something I was thinking about in my thought, was like being in the position where you get to enjoy yourself without thinking about all these stresses that I have now. And I think this summer, I've really, since I started live streaming particularly, since I started live streaming was really when that idea came back into place. Because I started thinking about being creative. I started thinking about wanting to learn again. I started thinking about wanting to make things, wanting to be creative, wanting to design, wanting to be an entertainer. And then I started learning Italian again after taking a break, learning Spanish again, picking up the piano and the guitar. And I think that's what really, recently speaking, has slingshotted that original thought that I had 4 or 5 years ago into my head. Was because of what's going on, because I'm thinking more about myself and the things that I'm passionate about and the skills and the hobbies I have. Because for a while now, I've only been thinking about work and school and continuing forward and making money and getting a nice house, getting a nice car, and blah, blah, blah. But now I feel like I can slow down and think about what I'm doing now. I can think about my hobbies, my passions. And it feels great. It feels great. It feels like I'm really doing it. Right? Thank you for watching, listening to me. See you all later. Bye.